Rain arriving through the second part of the night, the early hours of tomorrow morning through to Wednesday itself. Now, the minimum temperature is going to be a little milder than last night, between 4 and 6 Celsius. So a rather damp, murky start tomorrow morning. Quite a mild start, though. We'll see further outbreaks of rain, but mild temperatures at least for the next couple of days.
I'm back with the latest from BBC London in half an hour. There's plenty more on our website and over on BBC Radio London. Bye-bye for now.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock. You're watching Breakfast with Naga Munchetty and Dan Walker.
Good morning. Our headlines. Theresa May prepares to make the case for her Brexit deal to Parliament at the opening of 5 crucial days of debate.
Before that, the government could be found in contempt of Parliament for failing to publish its full Brexit legal advice.
What does the Brexit debate look like 400 miles away from Westminster? I'm here in Stirling to see how people here are following developments.
A scathing report on the rail industry's rollout of new timetables back in May. MPs say Transport Secretary Chris Grayling should have done more to prevent the chaos.
The Army shows off its new generation of autonomous war machines on Salisbury Plain.
It was an historic night in Paris where Luka Modric won the men's Ballon d'Or, ending a decade of domination from Ronaldo and Messi, and the very first women's award went to Ada Hegerberg, sparking a social media storm.
Good morning. It's a cold start to the day. We've got a widespread frost, also some patchy mist and fog, but for many it's also going to be a sunny start with just a few showers in the west. Later though, we've got some rain coming into the southwest. I'll have more in 15 minutes.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, the 4th of December. Our top story just after 8 o'clock. Theresa May will make the case for her Brexit withdrawal deal to Parliament later, opening a 5-day debate on the issue.
Before that, the government is facing a potential embarrassing situation if they if they are found to have broken the rules by not publishing their Brexit legal advice. Our political correspondent Ian Watson has the details.
Theresa May has been touring the country and the TV studios trying to sell her Brexit deal. But today she'll face the most demanding audience of all, her fellow politicians. But just before she begins the 5 days of debate on her deal, MPs will discuss whether her ministers are in contempt for failing to publish the legal advice which Parliament demanded last month. Last night, the Commons Speaker granted an emergency debate to be held around lunchtime today.
I have considered the matter carefully, and I am satisfied that there is an arguable case that a contempt has been committed.
If Theresa May is defeated and government ministers are found in contempt, this is likely to be seen more as a distraction than a disaster. A committee of MPs would have to consider what action to take. The government's accusing opposition politicians of playing politics.
I think it's a complete diversion from what the public are expecting to hear. We're going to have 5 days of important debate about the merits of Brexit, the withdrawal agreement. Let's get on with that and stop messing about with process.
What is significant is that one of the opposition parties who want to see the legal advice is none other than Northern Ireland's DUP, and their MPs usually prop up the Prime Minister's minority government. So this could be the shape of things to come. The really big vote isn't today, it's next week when MPs decide whether to back the Brexit deal. But today's debate may give a clue to the scale of opposition that the Prime Minister is likely to face. Ian Watson, BBC News, Westminster.
We can now speak to our political correspondent Nick Eardley, who's in Westminster for us this morning. We'll speak to the former Attorney General Dominic Grieve in about 20 minutes' time, Nick. But it could be potentially a really embarrassing start to a very important few days for the Prime Minister.
Yes, absolutely, because opposition parties they're really furious about this, Dan. They think the government is failing to adhere to Parliament's will by refusing to publish this full Brexit legal advice. Ministers, on the other hand, say this kind of thing is always confidential, and at the moment it doesn't look like they're going to budge. So it is perfectly possible that by the end of the day they will have been found excuse me, in contempt of Parliament. And it's hard to think of a worse start to what is a really busy 10 days or so for the Prime Minister. I beg your pardon, my voice is going. Wrong time for it to go at the start of such a busy week. But she has a huge mountain to climb over the next 5 days in Parliament if she is to persuade enough MPs to back this highly controversial Brexit deal. I was speaking to a couple of them last night, a couple of Tory MPs, one of whom said, never write the Prime Minister off. She's had her back against the wall before and she's managed to get things through. Another one said, if you think she's going to get this through, you're on another planet. So there's a rocky, febrile, uncertain few days ahead, and it all starts with the government potentially being found in contempt of Parliament.
Thank you very much for that, Nick. We'll let you go and get a glass of water. Perfect timing on the voice losing. Thanks very much, Nick Eardley, Westminster, for us this morning.
Nick wins the prize for getting through everything that needed to be said despite a frog in the throat.
Just got to dig in sometimes, haven't you?
Lesser men and women wouldn't have coped. I'll tell you, I wouldn't have. 8:05 is the time. The Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling, should take some responsibility for the chaos around the introduction of new rail timetables earlier this year. This according to a report by MPs. Mr Grayling has apologised for the disruption faced by hundreds of thousands of passengers on Northern and Govia Thameslink routes in May, but has said that he was given reassurance by train company bosses just days before. The Transport Select Committee says genuine change is now needed to restore trust in the railways. Well, earlier the group that represents rail operators in Britain said lessons had been learnt.
We need to look at the plumbing of the industry, how the architecture is working, because clearly it's not working for passengers. So we welcome this government review that's going to be carrying on for about a year, but we know that passengers can't wait for the results of that review, that we as an industry have to act to make sure that what happened in May doesn't happen again.
More than 4,000 children in England with special educational needs and disabilities were not given the support they needed at school last year, according to the Ofsted Chief Inspector. The regulator's annual report, which is published today, describes the failure as a national scandal. The Department for Education says it's working to improve standards with an inspection network. And we'll speak to Her Majesty's Chief Inspector at Ofsted, Amanda Spielman, in just a few minutes' time for you.
The family of a British woman who went missing from outside a bar in Tenerife has arrived to help with the search for her. 28-year-old Amy Gerard, originally from Cleethorpes, was last seen outside an Irish bar called Molly Malone's in Puerto de la Cruz in the early hours of Friday morning. Spanish police have released a missing poster appealing for information about Miss Gerard.
The French government is reported to be preparing to suspend fuel tax increases in the wake of violent protests against the measures. Anti-government protesters pulled out of a meeting today with the Prime Minister after allegedly receiving death threats from extremists. The group known as the Yellow Vest movement began demonstrating against fuel taxes last month, but the protests were hijacked by hardliners from both the right and the left.
The body of President George Bush Sr. is lying in state in the Capitol Rotunda in Washington. It follows a ceremony attended by the Bush family and senior political figures, including President Trump. There'll be a state funeral for Mr. Bush on Wednesday. Then his body will be flown back to Texas, where he'll be buried on Thursday.
Drones and unmanned vehicles are being included in the biggest ever exercise of military robots in battle scenarios, which is being carried out by the British Army.
There are some concerns about the development of the technology, as our defence correspondent Jonathan Beale has been finding out.
This is the future of warfare. Out on Salisbury Plain, the British Army and its allies are learning how to fight alongside robots, both on the ground and in the air. This Warrior armoured vehicle would normally be driven by a soldier. Here, it's all being controlled remotely from this box. And this is the first robot in Britain to be fitted with a remotely operated gun, here being sent into potential danger in advance of US troops. But this technology still comes with risks and as yet unanswered ethical questions.
Britain says it has no intent to develop lethal autonomous weapons, what some call killer robots. But as this technology develops, some will ask, who's really in control? Is it the man or the machine?
We would never use autonomous vehicles that could go out there and do stuff without a human being able to control it.
There are already calls for a ban on lethal autonomous weapons, but as yet there are no laws regulating or preventing their use. And there are fears this could be the beginning of a new arms race, with no one yet certain as to where it'll lead. Jonathan Beale, BBC News, Salisbury Plain.
Really interesting debate, isn't it? Approaching 10 minutes past 8 this morning. Thanks for being with us. A national scandal. That's how the Ofsted Chief Inspector describes the way that schools in England are treating children with special educational needs.
Amanda Spillman's annual report will be published later today. It's going to pay close attention to the growing number of vulnerable children who aren't receiving the support they need. She joins us now from our London newsroom. Good morning to Amanda Spillman. Thank you very much for talking to us today. I know the report is being officially published at 10 o'clock, but can you tell us the things that have concerned you that have come out of this report?
The things I particularly want to talk about this morning are about children with special educational needs and the provision they're getting, and also the continuing problem we're seeing with off-rolling. That's children falling out of school without a good reason.
OK, well, let's start with the children with special educational needs. One of the figures we've used today is that the number of children with special educational needs receiving no support is now hit 4,000. It's been reduced, though, from 4,000 in 2017 to around 2,000. Is that a good or a positive thing?
It's good news that it's down from a spike in 2017, but it's still well over double where it was in 2010. And the idea that any child with significant special needs is sitting without the support that they need after what's likely to have been quite a long delay for diagnosis is really worrying. And that's why I talked about a scandal. We have a system which is designed to provide joined-up care for these children, to bring together education and health and care. And the frontline workers are working their socks off in schools, in social services, and yet the pieces are not coming together in a way that's helping to get prompt diagnosis. We've got children with autism waiting 2 years, in some cases, for delays. We've got the intention of taking these children through to age 25 to help them through education and fully into the workplace. That's just not happening yet, where too often the post-19 provision is just more of what they were getting when they were school age. So we've got a lot still to do.
OK, let's talk about off-rolling then, which was the other issue you wanted to talk about. There are more children being pushed off the rolls. Why is that? How is that happening?
Well, we're seeing these increasing numbers of children disappear from school rolls at times that it's really surprising. Not many children would normally leave school between year 10 and year 11. And half of them aren't turning up on any other roll at all. So we've got about 10,000 a year who are simply disappearing from the system.
Why is that?
Well, we don't know, because we don't have any universal tracking of children in this country. We don't know.
Is it because, let me put this to you, we have spoken to many teachers on this programme. In fact, just in the last couple of weeks, spoke to a teacher as part of a documentary looking at what schools are going through in terms of preparing for Ofsted inspections and generally dealing with poor funding, decreased budgets, etc. Is one of the issues that Ofsted inspections put such pressure on schools, and in the light of limited budgets and competition, that they have to take these children off the rolls just in order to get pupils in, to get the funding they need?
No, this absolutely isn't the case. And in fact, our inspections very much reward schools that do the right thing by all their pupils and that really put in the effort with the children who are hardest to teach, who have the greatest difficulties in education. What we've got here is possibly partly driven by performance tables and desire to make numbers look good in performance tables. We do have some children disappearing just before, for example, the school census, supposedly to be home educated. But often by parents who there's good reason to think probably aren't fully equipped to home educate effectively. So we do have something that is a big concern here.
Amanda Spillman, you said schools are rewarded for doing the right thing by all their pupils, and you emphasised the word all as well. There's no specific SEND rating, special educational needs rating in Ofsted school inspections. How are you accounting for all the children?
Because when we inspect, we look at particularly at the special educational needs provision, we look at how the school is working with the children who are hardest to work with, and that can be a really positive point. The school I visited with Bramwell Jeffrey, education correspondent last week, for example, Bluecoat Wallerton, is a good example of a school that is really pulling the stops out and doing well-coordinated work with children with SEND, that is addressing problems at the very beginning, making sure they don't balloon, don't grow into bigger problems.
And well done, that school. It's exactly what we want to hear. But why aren't you assessing? Why don't you have a specific SEND rating?
If we have too many ratings...
No, but this is specific. You've wanted to come on and talk about it. I asked you what you wanted to talk about at the start of this interview. You said off-rolling and you said children with special educational needs. Those were the two things, yet Ofsted doesn't have a SEND rating. If it's important enough to talk about, why is it not important enough to have as one of your key ratings?
Because it flows through everything that a school does. It flows through its teaching and learning and assessment. It flows through personal development and behaviour and welfare. It flows through leadership and management. It's really important that we don't take children with special needs out and think of them as a completely different group of children getting a different education. It's actually fundamental that we don't lose sight of the fact that these are still children, very much children, needing the same education, the same quality of experience as everybody else.
Amanda Spillman, Chief Inspector of Ofsted, thank you very much for talking to us and highlighting the issues on Breakfast this morning.
Thank you.
It's 8:15, time to find out what's happening with the weather today and for the next few days. Carol has it with us, and it's definitely, Carol, I mean, I joked last month about being a big coat day, but it's particularly chilly this morning.
It certainly is, Dan. It's going to be a chilly day, colder than it was yesterday. Yesterday, parts of Hampshire reached 14.6 Celsius. Today, we're looking at a good 5-degree drop. Good morning. So what you can expect first thing is a widespread frost as temperatures have widely fallen below freezing. The other thing is there's the risk of ice on untreated surfaces in Scotland, where we've had the snow showers through the course of the night and the early part of today, and you can see them quite nicely actually on the snow and rainfall radar. So any showers in the north and west likely to be falling as sleet or snow above 250 metres. We could see a few showers across northwest England. They're more likely to be of rain at lower levels. We've got this ridge of high pressure across us, so things fairly settled, but we also have this weather front coming in from the southwest through the course of the day, and that is going to introduce cloud ahead of it, and then we'll see some rain coming in. So any patchy mist and fog we have this morning really starting to clear quite rapidly now, allowing a lot of sunshine. But through the day, the cloud comes in from the southwest, turning the sunshine hazy. Now, it's a cold and frosty start in Scotland, so some of that frost in the sheltered glens could last for you all day. After a sunny start in Northern Ireland, the cloud will build through the day. You'll see rain later. Fine day ahead for most of Northern England, also the North Midlands. But for Wales and for the southeast, the sunshine will turn hazy as the cloud advances. And we'll have rain by then coming in across the Isles of Scilly and also Cornwall, just starting to edge into Devon and also the Channel Islands. Wherever you are, it's going to feel cold, but particularly so the further north that you are. Now, as we head on through the evening and overnight, you can see how this front advances northwards, taking its rain with it. There's a second leg to it, which is going to come in behind. Ahead of it, a lot of cloud. There'll be some hill fog under clear skies across much of Scotland. Northeast England is going to be cold. So any patchy mist and fog that forms for you could well turn out to be freezing fog, another hazard to watch out for first thing in the morning. Now, through the course of tomorrow, you can see how our first front heads over towards the east, clearing off into the North Sea. The second one comes in behind it, bringing more heavy rain. In between, there will be a little bit of brightness, but also some drizzle. And this will produce some snow on the tops of the North Pennines, the southern uplands, and then eventually the Central Highlands. But for much of the day, the Highlands will have a fine, cold day with some sunshine. And behind these weather fronts, it will start to dry up. It may be too late in the day, though, for any lengthy sunny spells. But it's going to be mild for most of us on Wednesday. Thursday, it's going to be quite a breezy day, windy with exposure in the west. We've got a weather front bringing rain moving from the west towards the east through the course of the day, followed by blustery showers. There'll also be some sunshine in between, but again, note those temperatures, double figures right the way up to the central lowlands, 10s, 11s and a bit more than that. Then on Friday, an area of low pressure is coming our way. This may change, but you can see this huge area of rain. It's going to be a windy day as well with some sunshine, but we could have gales, even severe gales, with western exposure. Nananaga.
A changeable week, Carol. Thank you very much for that.
19 minutes past 8 is the time. Theresa May's authority received another blow after the Commons Speaker said the government may have actually broken parliamentary rules by not publishing the full Brexit legal advice.
The Prime Minister will open a week-long debate on her Brexit deal later today, but this development could well delay matters. To explain why, we can speak to the former Attorney General, Dominic Grieve, who joins us this morning from our London studio. Good morning to you, Mr. Grieve. Thank you for coming on discussing this with us this morning. So, if you were Attorney General, what would be your course of action here?
You've got to understand that the Attorney General doesn't control the advice he produces. It's a matter for the government. not for the Attorney General to determine whether the advice should be published or not. So this is actually not an issue which concerns the Attorney directly. It concerns the government collectively, and in particular the Prime Minister. My view has always been that there are very good reasons why the advice produced by Attorneys General should not be published. It's confidential to government, and if it isn't kept confidential, then attorneys will have to change the content of their advice to make it suitable for publication. The difficulty, however, is that Parliament 2 weeks ago stated by motion that it wanted to see that advice, and ultimately I think Parliament will get its way. So if the government can't persuade the House of Commons in the course of this afternoon's debate to change its mind, I think the government is going to have to produce this advice to Parliament.
So do you think that then derails the Prime Minister in the build-up to these crucial 5 days of debate?
Well, it's certainly going to produce a delay, because it was the intention that the debate was going to start this afternoon with 8 hours protected business. If we have a debate which deals with the contempt motion, which lasts 3 or 4 hours, which is perfectly possible, it's difficult to see how today's debate is going to start at all unless the government's happy to take it right through into the night.
How will you vote on it?
Well, on the contempt motion, the government has put down an amendment, and I remain supportive of the government's position on this. But as I've indicated to my government colleagues, if the government cannot persuade the House of Commons on this matter, it's going to have to produce that advice. Ultimately, the House of Commons cannot be frustrated from this demand, even if I happen to think it's a demand that shouldn't have been made.
So potentially a slight wobble for the Prime Minister, depending on what happens today. Can I ask you about these 5 days of debate, whenever that might start? You say it might be delayed, of course, because of things that might happen today. From your own position, you are a Remainer. It doesn't seem that you and many others in your party are very happy with any deal that could be put forward that would involve us seeing us leave the EU. Is it fair to say that you and others have made your mind up already, and that means you won't support any deal, even if the Prime Minister is trying to find the best deal available at the moment?
I don't think that's the right way of characterising it at all. The debate is on the deal that the Prime Minister has negotiated. Now, as you heard yesterday when the Attorney General came to the dispatch box in the House of Commons, this deal is a very unusual one. We are leaving one complex international legal organisation and order, the EU, and we are about to embark on enmeshing ourselves into a completely new one, which includes, rather unusually, a backstop within it under certain circumstances from which we can't extract ourselves. We're replacing one legal order with another. And all I'm saying, my position has been very simple on this. If this is what the British people want, then it ought to go back to the British people for them to approve it, and with the option of remaining in the EU. I believe that leaving the EU is a historic mistake, and that there are no substitutes for it which are likely to be better in the medium or long term for this country than remaining in the EU and working within it to change those aspects of it which we don't like.
It doesn't sound then that the Prime Minister could do anything to persuade you on that issue.
The Prime Minister's not in a position, certainly, because I've had a good chance of looking at the 85 plus pages of text, to persuade me that this is a deal which is valuable for the United Kingdom. No. She's done her very best. I have no criticism to make of her. It's not a failure of negotiating on her part. It's the fact that inherently the process of leaving the EU is risky and damaging for our country.
So if you seem to be saying that Theresa May will not be able to get her deal through, if that happens, to your mind, what happens next? What is the next step?
If the Prime Minister can't get her deal through Parliament, then the sensible thing for her to do is to offer Parliament the opportunity to debate alternative options and to listen carefully to what Parliament has to say on the matter. I'm absolutely convinced, and have been for a long time, that if Parliament is allowed to work collectively to find a way through this crisis, we will find that way. One of the difficulties at the moment is that the government has tended to close down the debate.
But this is what this debate is for. There's 5 days to talk about this.
There is indeed, and I have very little doubt that during the course of the 5 days of the debate, it will become clearer what the majority in Parliament actually want. But the debate itself is not going to resolve that, partly because the Labour Party has decided, for reasons of its own, that it wishes that it will not consider alternatives until the government motion has been voted down.
Why you, and you know, feel free to defend yourself against this, why are you further embarrassing your Prime Minister Theresa May?
This is a matter which, from my point of view, goes beyond party. I don't want to embarrass the Prime Minister. I've done my best over the last 2.5 years to support her since she took on what is frankly a thankless task. But the national interest has to come first. I'm not about to sign away my children's future into an arrangement which, in my view, is third-rate compared to what we have at the moment. I simply won't do that.
Dominic Grieve, really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for talking to us on BBC Breakfast.
Time now, it's 25 minutes past 8. Should we look at some Christmas lights? Should we brighten up the morning?
Yes, go
shall
on,
we?
then.
This is the work of two lovely people, a couple in Leicester, who've covered their home in festive lights as part of a tradition that's been going on for more than 30 years for them. Fred and Eileen Toon, who are 91 and 86, they save money from their pension each year to put this display on for their elderly neighbours. And lots of people have been getting in touch.
I think that's a nice effort.
I think it's brilliant.
I know you think it's too early.
I do, and lots of people are with me.
Right.
Sharon's with me, 100%.
Okay.
She says 1st of December too early. Joe's with me, totally agree about decorations and Christmas too early. It's not Christmas yet, and she's annoyed about the Christmas songs blaring out already. And Alan's with me. People go too far this Christmas.
Steve says mince pies yes, decorations no, not until the 13th.
Well, your mince pie's in August, aren't you?
Yes, soon as
He's with you, he's with you.
Put the decorations up 12 days before and take them down 12 days after. It's simple. Have my first mince pies on the 1st of the month.
Dan beat you. Dan beats everyone on mince pies.
Oh, no, hold on. In October, says Jules.
In October.
Well done, Jules.
Rob says he has 4 full-size trees that have taken over the whole office in 4 big black storage bins throughout the rest of the year. Go Christmas. Patricia, voice of reason. It's an individual choice. Of course it is.
Patricia,
Good
don't
luck
come
to
here
you
with your
it.
reasonable suggestions.
How dare you come here being reasonable. Go
It's,
and get the news, travel and weather where you are this morning.
8:26, see you in a moment.
Thanks for your thoughts.
Up next
Good
on the
morning
BBC
from
News
BBC
Channel,
London
a
News,
look at
I'm
what's
Tolu
happening in the
Adoye.
world of global business
London
with Business
Council
Live.
is warning of
And in
another
half an
year
hour,
of
it's the
austerity
news at
and
9
cuts
with all the
ahead of the
latest
government
stories.
revealing what they can spend.
Hi there, good morning. It's been a cold and, for some of us, a frosty start to the day, but it's been a bright start. There's some blue skies and some sunshine out there at the moment, but things will turn increasingly cloudy, particularly down towards the southwest of England through the course of today, and then later on into the afternoon you just see this arm of rain which will move its way into the Isles of Scilly, into the far southwest of England, southwest Wales as well. The cloud will increase ahead of that, but actually for many northern areas it's going to stay largely sunny. A few showers across Scotland, those will be wintry over the higher ground. A chillier day compared to yesterday, maximum temperatures getting up to around about 7 to 9 Celsius. Through tonight, that area of rain will continue to move its way north and east, with the cloud moving northward with it, and that will probably keep temperatures up above freezing. But you notice on the temperature map we've got those blues in the northeast of England up into Scotland, so here that's where you'll see a frost into Wednesday, temperatures down to about -1 to -3 degrees. Elsewhere, that, as I mentioned, it's turning increasingly milder. Now, through Wednesday, it's going to be a fairly wet day, actually, for many of us, particularly for England and Wales. We've got some rain spreading northwards. There'll be a bit of snow over the higher ground of the North York Moors, the northern Pennines, up into the southern uplands. Heavy rain, again, moving its way eastward across Wales and the southwest into the afternoon. A bit drier in Northern Ireland later in the day. Not as cold for many. Temperatures up to about 11 to 14 degrees, but still probably holding on to the colder air across Scotland. Going into Thursday, we've got another weather system that's going to move its way in, and then by Friday, this area of low pressure is developing. It's going to move its way in. That's going to turn things pretty nasty, actually, for some on Friday, with some gales, maybe even some severe gales, with some showers after rain clears away. But as you can see, temperatures around about 12 to 14 degrees Celsius. So it's certainly been milder than it is today. That's all from me. Bye-bye.
Hello, you're with Business Live from BBC News with Ben Thompson and Sally Bundock.
A bump in the road. German car makers are in Washington today to talk trade as President Trump threatens more tariffs on foreign cars.
We're live, we're in London. That's our top story today, Tuesday the 4th of December.
But Germany's Chancellor Merkel says it's Brussels and not Berlin that will determine EU trade policy. But these car makers, BMW, Daimler and Volkswagen, all need to find a way out of that looming trade spat. In the programme, finance ministers reach a deal to protect the euro against future crises as they again that it needs to change its budget. And markets are looking like this. Oil's on the up as Qatar bows out of OPEC. We'll look at what's moving those numbers and why.
And we've all heard the saying, take care of the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves. But it really can be made to work in the digital age. We're going to talk to the founder of an app trying to make that a reality. Also, we want to hear from you. There's a report out today in the newspapers that one school in London has had to take the step of capping what parents give to teachers as gifts, as luxury handbags and dinners out in a Michelin-star restaurant have been on the menu. So we're asking, is that right? Should teachers get gifts at all? What is the right balance? Get in touch. Use the hashtag BBC BizLive.
Hello to you, a very warm welcome to the programme. Now, when it comes to transatlantic trade, cars are big business. They're one of the EU's most valuable exports to the United States. And so, any new tariffs from the Trump administration could be a major blow to that trade. All attention lately has been on the trade war between the US and China, but Washington is still considering tariffs on European cars. So when top bosses from 3 of Germany's biggest car makers meet senior Trump officials at the White House later, there's quite a lot at stake. European manufacturers sold almost $54 billion worth of cars in the United States last year. Sales in the United States accounted for more than 14% of BMW and Daimler's revenues last year. It's rather less for Volkswagen, which is, by some measures, the world's biggest car maker. Well, now President Trump, though, is threatening to raise the current 2.5% tariff on EU-built cars to 25%. That compares with a 10% tariff for US cars that enter the EU. Well, President Trump says the tariffs are about protecting American jobs. Well, the 3 German firms employ more than 41,000 people across the United States. That number could go up even more if BMW actually goes ahead with its reported plans for a second US factory. But on the eve of those talks, Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel has reminded the 3 manufacturers that it is Brussels and not Berlin that is in charge of negotiating trade policy.
These trade issues are unanimously decided by the European Commission for all member states. At the same time, the German car makers are big employers in the United States. So there's clearly reason to talk to the US administration about issues such as investment and the future of the German car makers as employers in America.
Angela Merkel there. Well, we've got David Collins with us, trade lawyer and Professor of International Economic Law at City University in London. Good morning.
Good morning.
So Angela Merkel reminding everyone, actually, when it comes to these negotiations, it's Brussels that has to talk to the White House. However, these executives from the car makers are trying to lay the groundwork, aren't they, for conciliatory conversation?
Yeah, well, it looks like the car makers are probably trying to explain to the Trump administration how important it is not to impose the tariffs and really give a sense of how damaging they would be, and probably really just add to the voice of what the EU Commission has said all along, that what we really need to do is cut tariffs and not raise them.
And looking at the statistics that Ben was sharing with us, you can see that in many, many ways it's a win-win how it works currently with the number of jobs they provide in the United States, etc. So what do we think the White House might do?
Well, it really makes no sense. The only thing I can imagine is possibly going on there. Remember, it was the White House that invited the Germans, as far as we know. I suspect that the American administration is probably looking to encourage the Germans to open more plants in the US. So the idea behind that is move your production facility from Europe into the US to avoid this tariff wall, as it were. So that seems to be I would guess that's the motivation, and then the follow-on from that would be, of course, that this would lead to jobs in the US. That's probably the strategy. Whether or not that makes any sense is probably questionable.
It may, you know, sort of steer the thinking at BMW. We've already mentioned they do say they have plans for another factory in the US. But given the other headwinds that these companies are facing, and BMW said yesterday, the year ahead, you know, has got some headwinds, currency fluctuations,
of course,
the trade discussions going on with the US, but also the new restrictions and regulations on the way these cars are put together as well.
Yeah, of course. The trade agreements really is only one facet of the broader landscape, as you point out, and we've already seen in North America that a number of car plants have shut down, even if we had a new NAFTA concluded. So it's not really about necessarily tariffs or trade barriers. We have different consumer patterns. We know that the large vehicles aren't popular anymore. We've got the driverless car future coming probably in a decade, and fuel restrictions, these kinds of things. So I think what we're seeing really here is probably the Trump administration doing its best to save, I don't want to say a dying industry, but an industry that's in trouble in any way that he can.
Well, of course, the news from General Motors only last week shows the pressures on some of the big players in the US. Thank you very much, David, for coming in. David Collins there from City University.
Really busy programme today, so let's bring you up to date with some of the other stories making headlines. Samsung has extended its sponsorship of the Olympics by 80 years. The new deal takes the agreement through the LA Games in 2028. It's being a top-tier sponsor of one of the world's most watched sports events will give the Korean brand huge exposure as it fights for smartphone market share versus Apple and Huawei. It's thought the deal is worth around $50 million a year.
America's Altria, the maker of Marlboro cigarettes, is in talks with a Canadian cannabis producer over a potential investment in the company. Canada's Kronos Group confirmed discussions but said it had not yet reached an agreement. It follows, should I say, reports that Altria was in talks to acquire Kronos as it tries to move away from its reliance on traditional smokers.
And Elon Musk's firm SpaceX has launched 64 small satellites into orbit, a record number for the United States. The Falcon 9 rocket took off from California on what's been described as the largest ever ride-sharing mission on a US rocket. The satellites belong to 34 different companies, government agencies and universities. That still has the power to amaze me.
The mind boggles. Absolutely. I just think, you know, Elon Musk is just living the dream.
Yeah, just
what do you do
for
a living? What do you do for a living, Elon?
Launch 34
Fill
satellites.
Yeah.
We're in the
anyway,
wrong job.
Absolutely. The other big story, of course, is the trade truce that was reached supposedly between the US President Donald Trump and China's President Xi Jinping over the weekend.
Yeah, shares in Asia have been falling there amid confusion over what exactly those comments and commitments from China will mean, particularly when it comes to reducing import tariffs on US-made cars.
The plot thickens, so we've got Robin Brandt on board, our correspondent in Shanghai, to sort of bring a little bit of clarity. Robin, what is China saying about this today?
Well, China's not saying anything at all, and that in itself is hugely significant because we had President Trump yesterday tweeting claims that he said one of the things they had agreed on in Buenos Aires at the G20 when President Xi and Trump sat across the table was that China would reduce and maybe remove its import tariffs on autos coming into this country from the US, down from 40% to 25%. Now, China has not confirmed that, it's not denied it. In fact, it said nothing about that claim yesterday, and that's just one area where we have quite significant confusion emanating from the White House. This involves senior government figures. I mean, on the one hand, we have Larry Kudlow, who is President Trump's senior economic advisor, saying yesterday when it comes to car tariffs and them being reduced or removed, he said yesterday, that is my understanding. I believe that commitment was made at the table. But from another senior player, a man called Peter Navarro, he refused to confirm it had come up. In fact, saying certainly it had come up, but that's as far as he would go. No confirmation that it was indeed going to happen. Confusion as well over the 90 days or 60-day period of negotiation. And all of this leading one big auto firm, Ford, a major player, of course, here in China and abroad, to say it's encouraged by the discussions. But listen to these words. It's looking forward to learning more. That was in a statement to the BBC.
Robin, thank you for casting some clarity on that. It's about as misty as that skyline behind you in Shanghai. Thanks so much. Robin Bracknell, our correspondent, keeping an eye on those details of what emerges from those potential trade talks. Well, let's look at the numbers, because that possible, well, the euphoria over a possible end in sight to that trade war pretty much running out of steam as far as the markets are concerned. You can see a bit of a mixed picture across Asia. That, of course, the close in the US. Investors still questioning now whether the US and China will actually be able to reach a deal within, as you heard from Robin, that 90-day so-called truce period. Investors want some more details about how any of that will actually work. Let me show you what's happening, though, in Europe, and that's the current state of play. And I want to show you oil on the board there. You see Brent up above 62. That's after going up about 5%. Over the previous session. Oil up again, risks of a cut in supply boosting prices, and of course remember that news yesterday that we got that Qatar is going to pull out of OPEC, the oil cartel, casting more uncertainty over what is already a pretty uncertain market. So more on that for you in just a moment, but first let's head to the US. Michelle's got the details about the day ahead on Wall Street.
As you heard, German car makers are headed to the White House on Tuesday. Senior executives from Volkswagen, Daimler and BMW are expected to meet with US Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross and US Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer. The three companies are big employers in America. Also, US Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and White House Economic Advisor Larry Kudlow are scheduled to speak at a conference in Washington where, no doubt, they will be peppered with questions about trade after the US agreed to postpone additional American tariffs on Chinese imports for 90 days to allow talks to continue. On the earnings front, discount retailer Dollar General is expected to report a rise in sales for the last 3 months. Investors will look out for any updates from the company on the impact on its business of tariffs.
So that's Michelle Fleury in the US. Now let's just bring you up to date on some all-night talks in Brussels. And this time it's Eurozone finance ministers. They've actually agreed to measures. It's all about making the European single currency more resilient if there is a crisis in the future.
Yeah, it comes as they once again warn Italy of the need to change its budget plans for next year. Those talks being hammered out, but whether we get any more detail on what will actually happen as far as those talks are concerned clearly remains to be seen. Let's speak to Alex Stewart, though, who's fixed income fund manager at the investment firm Schroders. Hi, Alex. Morning to you.
Good morning.
Let's just start with that thought. I mean, look, clearly all eyes now on Europe about trying to sort out not only the budget, but also trying to bring some stability back to the euro. What are you looking at as far as that's concerned?
I mean, obviously this is all about trying to deal with what happens if they can't get a deal with Italy's budget. It's making sure that there is enough resilience in the financial system. They're talking about, you know, measures to perhaps be able to restructure debt for countries that get into trouble. So it's all, I guess, just about shoring everything up and having that backstop.
And it's not easy, is it? I mean, these kind of negotiations take forever because it's, again, Eurozone finance ministers trying to come up with measures that will sort of suit everyone within the Eurozone. And Italy is a prime example of an economy that's in a very different place to Germany.
Yes, and that's at the heart of the problems in the Eurozone, really.
With interest rates and everything.
But trying to get, you know, one size fits all, but also this idea of trying for the richer countries in the north to actually help out when other countries get into a little bit of trouble, which is obviously an issue if they're wanting to spend more to keep the people happy.
A quick word on oil as well, because we've seen oil prices starting to climb once again. We've got the latest OPEC meeting this week, expecting a cut in production that could therefore push prices up. And we know how much of an impact that has on the global economy, don't we? Because it filters through to so many things that we buy and consume.
Absolutely. I mean, we've had quite a big drop in the oil price recently, so it's going to be very interesting to see. They are expected to cut because it's obviously in the interests of these countries to keep the oil price up. But yeah, I mean, it has a big impact on inflation globally.
All right, thank you for now, Alex. Alex will be back later. We're going to get into the sort of politically sensitive issue of presents for teachers at Christmas time.
Yes.
Whew.
Do you buy presents for your
response.
kids' teachers if you've got kids at school? How much do you spend? Various schools around the world now imposing limits on how much you're allowed to spend. Maybe you chip in to do it. Because at your kids' school, you chip in, don't you, when you buy sort of one present?
I'm in charge this year.
What is the teacher getting?
I can't say, she might be watching.
That's true, actually.
But just to say, we're all pooling the money. We're pooling the money together as parents. So people are putting in £2, £5 each parent, and we put it all together, and I don't know, I'm not saying what we're going to get.
100 boxes of rubbish chocolate.
One bunch of flowers and a bottle of vino. I'm not quite sure yet. I haven't decided. Send in your suggestions.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that later. But also, still to come on the programme, if you take care of the pennies, will the pounds really look after themselves? Well, we're looking at one firm that's doing just that with a digital app. It's an app that lets you save odd bits of coins, and they all add up, apparently. We'll speak to the boss a little later.
You're with Business Live from BBC News. Now, I think, is this the first time we're saying the word Brexit?
No,
it's 15 minutes into the programme. Have you said it? I haven't said it yet.
Said it a little early.
All right then.
Sorry.
Well, we'll say it again. It's continuing to dominate, and in Scotland, of course, they voted to remain within the European Union for Prime Minister Theresa May. She says the deal she's negotiating is good for Scotland.
Yeah, but as far as Northern Ireland is concerned, a lot of business in Scotland thinking that Northern Ireland might end up getting a better deal. So Victoria Fritz is in Scotland. She's in Stirling this morning to see what that debate looks like. 400 or so miles away from Westminster. Morning, Victoria.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, a short hop, shall we say, from Westminster. Yes, of course, everywhere across the UK is looking at Brexit, trying to work out what all of this might mean for them. Now, the city of Stirling actually voted 2 to 3 in favour of Remain, but 2.5 years on, they've got a Conservative MP in charge of Stirling, and he said that he will back Theresa May, and he will back conditionally the plan that he has set out. Well, John Walton joins me now. John is the director of Go Forth Stirling. Now, John, businesses talk to you, don't they, every single day about how they're feeling, about how it's impacting their business. So what are their primary concerns when it comes to Brexit?
I think it's clarity and uncertainty, because the last thing the high street needs at the moment, we're fighting for every pound, is more uncertainty, more doubt being put into consumers' minds about the future of where their spending is going to be, the sort of what things are going to happen with the Brexit process, and the constant political footballing going on is just driving everything on bonkers, to be honest with you. So I think what's really important is clarity and certainty. That's what's really important for the traders, so they know what's going to be happening going forwards.
Let's bring in Phoebe quickly. Phoebe McCulloch, you're a maths and economics student. What does the future hold for you? You voted to leave.
I voted to leave in the referendum and the snap election on the basis that Theresa May would have delivered on her 3 main promises, which was control on our borders, and leaving the jurisdiction of the European Courts of Justice, and thirdly, that the UK can make our own trade deals as a sovereign country. And I feel that the new Brexit deal that we have presented with us completely violates those promises. And she's gone, and instead what we have now, we're still contributing a fee to the EU, and we're still bound by EU law. And lastly, we're actually still bound by the trade international agreement by the EU.
Phoebe, I'm going to have to leave it there. So of course there's a battle over Brexit, but there's a longer running fight over independence here in Scotland as well.
Hello, you're watching Business Live. Our top story today, bosses from 3 of Germany's biggest car makers are in Washington. They have talks later with Trump officials that they hope will stop the proposals to impose new tariffs on cars made abroad.
Markets in Europe have been trading now for just over 45 minutes, and this is how they look today. A mixed picture emerging, as you can see.
Yeah, it's not on the board there. Oil back on the up ahead of that OPEC meeting that takes place this week.
Now, many of us want to save more, but just never really get around to doing it. We lack discipline. You may feel you have no spare money to save.
Yeah, in fact, more than 80% of people in the UK don't save on a regular basis. Slightly more worryingly, though, 9.6 million households in Britain have no savings at all.
But when it comes to banking, 2 out of 5 people now regularly use mobile banking apps.
Well, Moneybox is an app that uses technology to encourage people to save and even invest with, well, as little as £1 or just $1.25.
Ben Stanway is co-founder of Moneybox, with us here for Business Live. Welcome to the programme, Ben.
Thank you.
So this is a company you started some 3 years ago. Prior to that, you were sending flowers in boxes. Tell us about that journey.
Well, there's a surprising number of similarities between the two. I think in both cases we're using technology through mobile phones to deliver a great customer experience. And I think part of the customer experience with Moneybox is just to try and make the whole saving and investing journey as simple as possible.
So tell us how it works.
Yes, so a really popular feature with Moneybox is roundups. This is where you connect a bank account and you can round up the change from your everyday purchases to invest for your future. It's a great place to start. People really like it. People tend to save about £600 a year using roundups, but about 3/4 of our customers go on to set aside larger amounts of money towards things like houses, their children and environment.
So say I buy a coffee and it costs me, £2.23.
Yep.
What sort of money are we talking about rounding up? It's just a few pence, is it?
You give me some tough maths there. Let's go with £2.50. So on your way to work, you buy a coffee for £2.50.
Yeah.
That 50 pence is automatically set aside, meaning that before you've even got into the office in the morning, you've set money aside to invest
So
for your
you're always
future.
rounded up to the nearest pound.